So today's reading is from Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. A disciple asked how he could recognize his own natural, primal condition. Maharshi answered, "Absolute freedom from thoughts is the state conducive to such recognition." Then a visitor asked if the study of the sacred books will reveal the truth. Ramana said, "That will not suffice." "Why not?" And Ramana replied, "Samadhi alone can reveal it. Thoughts cast a veil over reality, and so it cannot be clear in states other than samadhi." The questioner asked, "Is there thought in samadhi, or is there not?" Maharshi replied, "There will only be the feeling I am, no other thoughts." "Is not I am a thought?" he was asked. He replied, "The egoless I am is not a thought, it's a realization. The meaning or significance of I is truth or God. The experience of I am is to be still." Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So welcome to Satsang. So the reason that this reading was selected today is because it points to a very important condition, or you could say a practice, or a very important point about pursuing the inquiry. Because Ramana says that in the state of stillness, which he's calling samadhi, of one-pointedness, there is no thought. And often we get confused in our pursuit of this particular state of no thought with the notion that there's nothing present. And he clearly says, all that is present is the feeling, this is very important, the feeling I am. So he's not saying that I am is a thought, so that we're sitting and we're using the notion of I am like a mantra. What he's pointing toward is what you can look at right now in this moment. If you look inside yourself, not with your mind, but just looking as a witness, you can have the direct feeling that you exist. Can you not? Well, this is the place where we rest attention. And when we come to this place of the feeling state I am, now it's time to just relax. and just to be. And this is where stillness is experienced, or samadhi. And the reason I wanted to point this out is because some of you now, over the last few weeks, have been playing with this, toying with this, and noticing that often the mind comes quiet when you start to look. This is very good. But then the mind starts to look for something, right? That's the mind's job, is to name things, be aware of things in some way, make decisions about things, opine about things that are going on in your life or going on in your experience. This is the mind's job. And so often when we come to this place where we come to the feeling I am, as a feeling state, right? Not as a thought, not as I am this or that, I'm male, female, old, young, rich, poor, happy, sad, not this experience of living in a body as a body, but just our mere existence, that thing which is present, very first thing when we come out of sleep in the morning, the very first thing, the very first recognition that there is, even before there is thought, is that I am. I know I'm awake now, I know I'm in the body now. And even without this thought that I'm in the body, there's this recognition I am. And that this is a feeling, it's not a thought. And so he's pointing us to a very critical juncture there. Because sometimes what will happen for most of us is even we'll be having a very sublime thought. Oh, I'm very peaceful, I'm very calm, I'm very happy, whatever it is, can be a very sublime thought. And will somehow, the mind will tell us, oh, that's it, you've got it, now you're finished, you're done. And this is the veiling of the mind. And as Sri Ramana points out very clearly, every time a thought is present, doesn't matter how lofty it is, how sublime it is. If there is a thought present, there's an element of veiling that's happening about who you really are, right? About the truth of your own nature. There is a veiling that's going on. This is not a problem, it's just to recognize that this is the nature of mind. Mind has as its own nature, this quality of veiling or hiding the truth of your own nature. So no matter how subtle the thoughts are, no matter how sublime they may be in a given moment, or how horrible they may be in a given moment, always know that when you're interested in inquiry, when you're pursuing the inquiry, that if there is any thought present, you have more work to do. This is all. It's just an indicator. It's not a measure of your success or your failure. It's not a measure of you as a yogi or a practitioner. It's not a measure of anything other than the veiling quality of the mind is still present. Knowing this, then it becomes very easy in some way to just fall back into this recognition, this feeling state, I am here, and then to wait there. What are you waiting for? This recognition that you exist brings you to this place, and that you exist before thought and without thought and without opinion and without statement and without decision about who you are, what your state is. That you are here and aware, and that this is your natural and true state. The reason to come to this place is so that you can begin to see the way in which your life is dictated by your thoughts and pull away from them. Learn not to trust them. Learn not to accept at face value whatever your mind is telling you about yourself, about your experience, about the world. It's said in practice by all the sages, and it was said by the Buddha, that the final samskara, the final tendency which goes with the recognition, I am that which is aware, and full knowledge of that, is doubt. And people are plagued by this. You may have also been plagued by this kind of doubt. This doubt is the existential doubt that says, I'm not that, and I can never be that, and I'm never going to wake up. It's this existential doubt. But as I'm fond of saying, we take our demons and we make them our near ally. And so in this case, the natural tendency toward doubt, which is there and present, yet as a recognition we can have about ourselves, is now used, instead of turning against ourselves, to go deeply into our thinking processes and to say, I don't believe that. So instead of doubting that I am the one which is aware, or I am the one which is awake, or I am the witness of what is occurring in body, mind, or world, I now turn that doubt toward my own thoughts, my own opinions. So now I'm saying, when the mind says, I don't understand this, I'll never get this, I'm never going to wake up, I'm never going to be the one who realizes the truth, we doubt that thought. We say, this is not true, and I know it's not true. Now we've turned our demon of self-doubt into our ally. And we keep returning to the thought, or to the recognition actually, I am aware. I am that which is aware. We keep turning to that. In the beginning, this can feel like we are trusting something, but we don't quite know what it is. For many of us, it's the words of the teacher, the words of the guru. If the guru says, you are that, then you trust that. And everything which is counter to that, you don't trust that. You place your doubt there. Don't place your doubt on the words of the guru. When the guru says to you, you are that, you are free, you are whole. There is nothing you need. Just keep putting down the notion that you are not that you will never be that. You understand? How we turn this doubt that we will ever wake up into the tool which challenges the mind, the limited opinion of who you are. If you persist in this over time, you eventually come to this place where your understanding, your trust begins to manifest, right? Because the mind and the heart together are very powerful. So what you persist with, your practice, your intention, your recognition that you are that, even when the mind says, no, you are not, this eventually becomes true for you. And it becomes very important along the way to doubt everything your mind is telling you about who you are, who you've been in the past, who you will be in the future, whether you're a success or a failure. So forget everything and know that you are that which is aware. Persist in this until it becomes your direct experience. This is the straight path. Some of you now are knowing, because I'm getting very good reports the last few days from those of you that are practicing diligently, inquiring diligently, about your insights that are coming now. But also that there's an awareness that somehow this path becomes steeper. And Sri Ramana likened it to walking around a mountain. You know, if you take a long time, you can take steps and you can slowly go up to the top of the mountain. Because all the spiritual paths end up on the top of the mountain, don't they? Doesn't matter what religion or what tradition you're in, you persist. Keep going deeper and deeper into your practice, into the teaching that's being offered to you. And eventually you come to realize something about who you are. This is the top of the mountain, and all the paths can lead you there. But this particular path of inquiry, he said, this is like climbing right straight up the side of the mountain. This is for those of us that are certain enough about the truth that we're looking for, that we're willing to undertake this path because it can be challenging. When we cleave to the words of the Guru, when the Guru says, you are that. When we hold to those thoughts, when we hold to that understanding, and we trust the teachers and the sages, the thoughts, ideas, and beliefs and experiences of our past and our present that stand in the way of us embodying that truth, they come up quickly. And this is just to distract us from the remembrance. I am that which is aware. So just keep coming back to this question, who am I? What is aware of this? Am I aware? And to the recognition, I am aware. I am that which is aware. And follow all these thoughts, these doubts, and these fears back to their source, to the recognition that you are that which is aware. And then rest there. Do this over and over and over. And of course, you know, you have to persist in this even when the mind wants to shut you down, right? Because you know that it will. The mind will try to shut this practice down. Some of you are having that experience now, or you've already had this experience. But don't give it any energy. Just notice that what it's doing is trying to shut you down, and come back to silence. Come back to this feeling presence, I am. And do this over and over. And just to reassure you, don't do it over and over forever. You do it over and over until it doesn't even occur to you to do it anymore. As long as it occurs to you that you are not that which is aware, or as long as you keep getting lost in the definitions of the mind about who you are, persist. Because when you don't need to do it anymore, it just falls away on its own. Then you'll start to notice this in the beginning. Some of you have heard me say the story of Annamalai Swami, who was one of Ramana's principal devotees, who decided one day he was going to literally count how many times a day he forgot and had to ask the question, who am I? Again. And over the course of a couple of days he did this, and then he finally sat down and said, so I had to do this 700 times yesterday. But this is not the experience as it stays forever. As you do this more and more often, asking this question, what is aware? Who am I? And just setting aside the doubt. Every time the mind stands up and says, no, you are not this. You can never be this. He could wake up, she could wake up, but you cannot. Every time the mind does this, you just put it down. You don't have to be mean toward the mind. You can just put it down gently. With the question, who am I? Who is thinking this thought? Who am I? What is aware here? Am I aware? With the recognition I am aware. Just keep this process up. I know I'm repeating this several times, but this is to demonstrate to you what your experience will be like, and how many times in a minute, a day, an hour, you may need to do this process over and over and over. To come to realize that you are that which is aware. And as you do this, the 700 times becomes 500 times, and then it becomes 200 times, and then it becomes 50 times in a day. And there's this recognition that in between you're resting. Resting from what? From this mind, which has had you trapped for such a long time. Reinforcing thoughts about who you are. And this is not an easy thing. Now, some of you are already beginning to see this. That the mind's position is not that it wants to stay in this quiet, that it wants to stay in silence, right? The mind's position is it wants to be busy and engaged and active all the time. But most of you have realized by now that this busy, engaged, and active mind, which is going on all the time in sort of a loop tape, this is draining your energy, draining your life force. It's not getting you anywhere. And the repetition of this tape loop is just a habit. And it can feel to the mind like it's so important, it's so significant. The mind does not want to go into stillness, right? It doesn't want to go there. But the mind does not have a mind of its own. You are the owner of this mind in some way. The reason I say that is because it's possible, and most of you have noticed this by now, it's possible for you to witness a thought as it comes into the mind when you're sitting, especially in satsang, or you're meditating at home. You can see a thought come into the mind. You can actually, by not grabbing it, you can actually let it be in the mind, and it'll be there for a period of time, maybe short, maybe long, but it will go. Most of our thoughts are not in our minds very long, right? They're about very ordinary things. We're not talking about big revelatory thoughts here. We're talking about, oh, it's sunny, oh, here comes a cloud, oh, that's a beautiful rainbow, oh, the trees are moving, oh, that's a lovely flower, right? There are these thoughts which come, and they just come and they're just there for a moment. But every once in a while some thought comes about the nature of who we are. Oh, I don't get this, I don't understand it, I'm suffering, I'm struggling. These are also just thoughts. If we can see a thought, we cannot be it. Has this occurred to you yet? If you can see a thought, you cannot be a thought. You have to be what's looking at the thought. You cannot be the thought itself. Look at this. This is the way we break that bond, which says that I am my thoughts, I am my body, I am this way of being in the world is this way, that way, the other way, making decisions about everything that goes through the mind. When we lose interest in making decisions and having opinions, this is a big one, having opinions about every single thing that goes through the mind, this is when we can begin to notice that a thought can come, I have no opinion about it, now it's gone. Oh, interesting. This opens a doorway for us. The doorway to our own silence, to our own recognition that we don't need thought in order to be the one who is aware. At this moment, our perception and our experience begins to change. We're no longer victimized by our own thinking. We're no longer the one who is led around by our own opinions about ourselves or about another or about world. We're just not willing to play anymore. And we come to understand something about the nature of ourselves as pristine awareness, awareness which does not have opinions, does not have any statement about anything. It's just here. And it's in this just here-ness, or in this witnessing quality of ourselves as awareness, that we begin to notice the real, true beauty of our own being and of everyone else around us and of the world around us. And it's not that we don't notice that there's difficulty in ourselves or in another or in the world. We do notice that. But because our reactivity level comes down, now we're able to be there and be available as compassion, as love, as understanding, as presence, even in the face of suffering. Suffering of the body, suffering of the mind, suffering of an apparent other, or suffering that we witness in the world. Out of this place of compassion and love, we may remain silent, if that's what's required, and we may also act, acting from a place of loving kindness, compassion, understanding, rather than from a place of judgment, fear, or self-doubt. So just keep coming back to this recognition, this feeling presence I am, many times throughout the day until you don't need to anymore. And some of you are already having that experience where there is this recognition of presence which is becoming more steady throughout the waking state from morning till night for you. Not that you can't be triggered by something or you can't forget, but that this notion, this recognition of your own feeling state as I am is present more and more often. And then you become fascinated about where it might be leading you. Until you that's being led anywhere just disappears. Now you are just here as being, consciousness, and bliss. Someone was telling me recently how much more difficult it was for them to be persistent in this when they're home by themselves. So some of you may have noticed that. But it's good to notice this, because if you don't notice this, then you become very busy with externals. So you notice that you keep a list going all the time. You know, the number of projects you need to do is always 2 months out somewhere. You know, and right, or the stack of books on your bedside gets taller and taller and taller. You know, just so that you have an out in case you get. In case you can't be in your own presence anymore. Or, you know, the modern scourge for most of us, you know, is the TV, the computer, and the cell phone. And we stay on our device, and the tablet, and who knows what the next device will be, because it seems like we don't have enough devices already. So they seem to keep inventing them so that we just move from one device to the other. How did you do with your list the other day? Did you remember to put other things on? Did you remember all the things I had forgotten to put on the list?
No, I didn't remember any, but
oh, good.
I did. No, just now though in this you talking, I made a nice little connection. There's an issue that I'm having these days in reacting to somebody, and it just, I made the connection that it's where I get hooked is doubting that I can stay in a place of clarity when I'm contacted by them, or I run into them, or I think about them even. Just these days, just thinking about them will just like, you know, clinch up, and because I know I'll run into them, and I don't want to be in a, you know, I don't want to be in a hooked place. And you know what you said about doubt
Therefore,
applies to that.
Thereby being hooked without even running into them.
Yes, absolutely. It's almost worse in a way.
Uh-huh.
But what you said about doubt applies to that. It's like I see that is I doubt my ability to stay in a balanced, clear place in their presence, and it's not true. I can't.
Yes, but understand that there's a reason why that's happening, okay? And that's because there still is a deep identification going on with the idea, I am these thoughts.
Right.
In other words,
Yes.
the thoughts of the person can come, the thoughts of the hook can come, the thoughts keep coming.
Yes.
All right?
Oh, definitely.
So there's a deep
there's like
identification
two different,
with that I am the thoughts themselves.
Yes, or that those thoughts represent who I truly am. Yes, I see that. And
But do understand, they do interfere with who you truly are, but they are not who you truly are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Which was the point of this reading.
Yeah.
Yes. So I will say, so understand that you see that hook, you see that tendency to go in that direction?
Yeah.
So what's the remedy to it? You see, the remedy to it is that you have to, in moments when those thoughts are not present, right? Moments when you're not in the presence of that particular other, you have to come to this point of clarity, right? You have to be there as often as you can.
Right.
Because the more often you come to this place of clarity, through the inquiry, through this manipulation of the mind in effect, right? Who is aware of this thought? What is aware of this thought? Who am I? Who is doing this thinking? Through that inquiry process, using words, you have to come away from that and back into clarity. And then your clarity, because let's say at the moment you're by yourself, or you're on your cushion, or you're at home, or you're at a job and you're just working, and that person is not around and you're concentrating on something else, now you start to generate the stability of your own clarity. So that when you do come into a circumstance where you've tended in the past to lose your clarity, you have a firm foundation. Because what many of us want to do is that when we're not actually in the situation, we say, oh, I'll just chill. I'm not gonna bring this up on my own. I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna look toward my own clarity. I'm not gonna inquire, am I aware in this moment when there doesn't appear to be anything present? But by doing that, by asking the questions in moments of peacefulness, in moments when there aren't strong hooks or triggers present, we're able to become more and more familiar with what it means to remain as you are, or to remain silent. Remain as presence, right? When the circumstances are really conducive to that. Okay?
I'm wondering, it's a thought just pops up here. Is there any value when I can get to that place where I'm really just clear and balanced and present? Is there any value in bringing that person to mind so that I can hold both of those things at the same time? That I can remain balanced and clear in spite of having the thought or the memory.
So go to clear and balanced first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah.
And don't do anything.
Okay.
If there's a strengthening that's going to happen through relationship with that person, they'll come naturally into the clear and balanced state in which you're at. But they'll mostly come as not as something you engage in forcefully. They'll come as the test to your clear and balanced and present state, right? Which is the service that they're really providing to you anyway.
Absolutely.
You see, there is no other.
Absolutely.
There is only your own mind manifesting.
Yes.
So and sometimes it appears in the form of an other, but the other is always a reflection and projection of the mind itself. There is no other. So when the mind says there is an other, you can be aware, this is the projection. But the difficulty is not with the other. The difficulty is in mind. So we keep coming back to this notion, who is thinking this thought, who is noticing this mind, who is witnessing this mind, who is aware of this mind, so that we come back into the natural, clear presence, which is balanced and stable. And then eventually, someday, this what the mind will reflect is the balanced state, right? And the other will walk into the space, and there won't be a sense of an other. There'll be a sense of oneself. So that, meaning there'll be no reactivity, right? Because presence of one will have been stabilized. So it's very important that we just keep coming back to this pristine state of recognition, unencumbered by what we think our issue is, what the mind thinks its problem is. Right? The mind will want to inject that difficulty into the clear space, no doubt about it, until that conditioning is undone. It'll just keep coming. And people have this question a lot. Well, how come this keeps coming and I keep doing nothing about it, or I keep letting go of it, and it goes away, but it only seems to go away for a period of time. And then it will just sort of blindside me 2 months later, 6 months later, a year later. It will just come around and blindside me again. It's because this is the way that the mind tests to see whether we are stable, whether we are not we, because there is no we at this point, but whether awareness is stable in and as itself.
Yeah, kind of like a challenge or an exercise.
It just happens, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even say why that happens. I can only say that I notice in my own experience and in the experience of others that it happens.
Yeah.
It's not until we are able to be present with whatever is, without reactivity, without doubt, just presence, yes, that things really begin to drop quickly in that moment. But it's not until then that the challenges somehow diminish. And I don't want to make that sound like you don't have any control over it, because always the practice is, who is thinking this thought? And coming back to the stopping of the mind. That's our tool for stopping the mind that wants to keep interjecting about whatever we think our issue is or our problem is. And the reason I say to you, no, don't forcefully bring that person in as an other, is because that's the way of reinforcing the notion of other. What we want to do is keep coming back to the recognition that I am that which is aware. And in this awareness there can be all of this, but there also is not a need for this kind of reactivity that comes, that's indicated by the notion that there is a problem. That's a form of reactivity, right? You know? You see, in and of an other on his or her own, there is no problem. Because there is no other. It's only when mind steps in and says, this is a problem. Now the notion of other is reinforced, and along with the notion of problem. So don't play that game, because that's the mind's game.
Thank you.
A lot of times, spiritual life is spoken of in terms of discipline of various kinds. There really is only one really necessary discipline, and that's the discipline to keep saying, I'm not this. I'm not listening. I'm not doing this anymore. Whatever the form is for you. I'm not this. Until there is no need to say, I am not this anymore. So if there's any effort, and there is an effort that's required, it's just to persist in this recognition that you are not what is happening in the mind, body, and world. Because if you persist in this notion that you are not the mind, body, and world, you very naturally, very quickly, and very organically come to this question. Well then, what is true? Who am I? What is the truth of being? This comes very naturally and very quickly as soon as you lose interest in everything else. As soon as you say, I'm not doing that anymore, I'm done with that. And we don't do that with the hostility, right? We do that with the intention of just letting go of things.
Mm-hmm.
Letting go of reactivity, letting go of beliefs, letting go of conditioning.
Rishi, would you say then that the mind's idea that there is separateness, like I, me, you, is that a form of doubt?
How are you using doubt in that circumstance?
I think my mind, even though I want to believe, and I felt before I've had the feeling of the sense that there's just one, my mind says, nuh-uh.
Yeah, in that way for sure.
And it's easy to, my mind is, it's easy to convince myself, like, well, yeah, obviously, I'm me and you, but it's harder the other way around sometimes.
Yeah, but you can turn that on its ear just by saying to yourself when you notice that that's happening. You can just turn that on its ear. The mind is saying, obviously, there's many. But what happens if you feed the mind, obviously there's only one? Over and over, right? Because understand that obviously there's many. It's coming from a lifetime of conditioning that there are many, right? And that sometimes those many are unpleasant or dangerous or loving or whatever, this is the dance of mind. But what happens if you begin to recondition that in some way? You're saying, so this is where the element of faith in some way comes in the teacher, in the masters, in the sages, in the teaching. So, the teaching says there's only one. So this belief, that what you're calling a doubt, that there is only one, that there is actually a multiplicity, it can't be true, because the sages have said so, that it isn't true. And they're sages because of their deep understanding, and they're recognized to be that, right? And they've been around throughout all of humanity's existence, telling the world that there is only one. But maybe the way the mind can more simply come to it for some people is to understand that everything which is observed is not an other, it's a reflection of mind. Yeah. This might be an intermediary step. Is come to accept and embrace everything as mind, everyone who's in my life, everything that is appearing in this awareness which I am, is here informing me, mirroring something about, reflecting something about this consciousness, this awareness. And it's limited. It's limiting, right, in some way, or limited in some way. So, if I first begin to recognize that all of this is a manifestation of mind, then eventually I can come to realize that even the belief that it's a manifestation of mind is incorrect. Everything is true. Everything is God. Everything is one. Everything is love. You frame that whatever way you want. Everything is consciousness itself.
Is that how one cultivates faith? Or does faith just come?
I think that's very individual, don't you? Some people naturally have a very high level of faith about what they're pursuing. But I can tell you this, if you're sitting in this room, we're not talking about religious faith, right? But if you're sitting in this room, you have been pursuing self-knowledge probably for a very long time. So we can use words like faith, right? I use them, because that's something that is close to my experience. Was coming to trust and understand the Buddha, the Dharma, Ramana, the teaching of Vedanta. So for me, I have this sort of innate faith, which wasn't always there when I was very young, but certainly as I have matured in life. But we don't have to adopt or say, well, I want to have faith in God, love, truth. I don't have to do that. Because if you're here right now in this moment today, what I'm calling faith is very likely what brought you here. But for you, it may be just the belief that you are much more than your thoughts, much more than your experience as a body, much more than your feelings, much more than the experiences you've had in your life. You somehow know. So that's what I'm calling faith, okay? Is this knowing which brings you here, which has enabled you to go throughout your life and not give up on this pursuit. And that if you never come back here again, I'm absolutely certain you will not give up questing to understand who you are. Because that is not dependent on me. It's not dependent on the teaching. This is a characteristic which, whether you can acknowledge it or not at this moment in your life, you have. It's why you're sitting here. The paradox, of course, of sitting here is that I eventually say to you, you have to stop that. You have to stop that seeking. Yeah. You have to go from seeking to being. And then we come here and we try to answer the question, how do we do that? So just to answer your question completely, understand that as far as I'm going to take you is, don't cultivate faith either. You have enough faith, that's why you're here. Now stop. Don't cultivate anything. That's what I keep saying to you over and over. Stop. Stop all that you think you've been doing for such a long time and come to here now. The metaphor I used before of cultivating certain kinds of attitudes and so forth, this is the mountain path that goes like this, around and around the mountain. You cultivate compassion, faith, understanding, but however you this is like this path. But when I say stop, be here with me now, fully, this is the path to the top. Be in your own presence as the feeling state I am. This is the direct path. We can still play if you want to take a detour around the side of the mountain sometime, it's okay. But we will eventually land on. stuffy in here. If you want to open the windows, and I tried to keep the cool in this morning, but if you want to open the door behind you, if you'd like to have a little bit more air, it's kind of getting stuffy. Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardanam urvarukamiva bandinam mrityormukshiyamamritava swaha bhagava bhu om sat jung hang om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.